Welcome, Gemini, to a new cosmic chapter. Saturn, which rules time, in Greek mythology known as chronology, moves to the very start of the overall zodiac. This only happens once every 29 and a half years. He had a brief visit to this point of the zodiac last year for just over 3 months, and you may have found through the summer months in the north or the winter months in the south that you started to think afresh about certain friendships, long-term plans, or higher purpose. That whole process starts again now. We can think about Saturn in Aries in isolation. I'm going to share with you the upcoming aspects for this year and also tell you about the retrograde that occurs as well. But it's important to understand the natal chart when Saturn arrives, because the interaction between all the players there is going to help you and I to understand what's ahead over the next 2 years through to April 2028 when he leaves and goes into the sign of Taurus. And we need to be particularly mindful of your ruler, Mercury. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're a returning visitor, your views, comments, and likes are truly appreciated. I've been getting quite a few hypes. Thank you for those. If you've yet to hype, please be open to it. If you're new here, a warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe, please help the channel to continue to thrive and do so now. And stay with me to the end of this video, please. And if you do, I'll give you the opportunity to download a guide, a free guide, to help you navigate the next 2 years ahead. So on the screen is your event chart, because we can think about Saturn in isolation in Aries, but we need to understand that the exact moment Saturn returns, what are all the other planetary implications? What are their influences? And they will provide a backdrop for the next 2 years. And your ruler Mercury is pretty close to the North Node in the 10th house. So though Saturn's made way from the part of your chart that's to do with goals, ambitions, work, worldly interaction, if you have your own business perhaps, or added responsibility over the last couple of years around elderly parents or older parents, it wouldn't be a surprise. But Mercury in the sign of Pisces is not its best location, and it's important to work on precision, especially as far as that interface with the world at large. But being very close to the North Node, you may find that when it comes to what you do for a living or your goals and ambitions, it's important to be guided by your instinct, not just logic. And you're a sign that's usually most comfortable with logic. So those ambitional parts of your situation are still very much to the fore. But with Saturn very close to Neptune, and they come into the exact conjunction on the 20th, which hasn't happened for 37 years, for sure it is a time for you to think about those long-term plans. But I want you to be mindful that the moon, very much to do with your feelings and instincts, is in a very transformational part of your chart, suggesting that when it comes to emotions, something's in a state of change. And it's in an opposition with Jupiter in the part of your situation to do with your values, but also potentially everyday money. So even if Saturn and Neptune are asking you to connect and relate and network with a group of people that you feel comfortable with, you still need to feel valued. And I think you still need to be quite visible, because having Venus right at the top of your chart suggests that the need for connection, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through creativity, whether it's through your talent as a performer of some kind, you need attention. But who you know and what you know are just as important over the next 2 years, I feel. Is there a little bit of a gotcha? Well, I think it's really the fact that the sun is in a square with Uranus. Apart from those 4 months last year when Uranus nipped into your sign, he has been in the 12th house of your chart full time since March 2019. And this may have made you feel quite restless. There may have been moments when it's been more difficult to switch off, more difficult to get to sleep, almost an excess of adrenaline. you may have also been pushed in a way, uh, sometimes reluctantly perhaps, to be more mindful of the psychological dimension of your nature. Because being an air sign people, myself included, are most at home with logic, thinking and talking about things. And Uranus has been asking you to just be more at peace with the more psychological, but also the more vulnerable part of your being. And the angle between the Sun and Uranus suggests over the next couple of years that some more uh, revelations or more insights may present themselves to you. So if you're someone who's actually really embraced Uranus and worked hard at your inner self and understanding your deeper motivations, you're going to feel this a lot less. But if you are in any kind of situation where you feel a bit closed in, there's a part of you that's going to want to break out. And that can be just as much around holiday destinations you've often gone to, the interests you have, or the friendships you keep. That Saturn and Neptune in your 11th house are, in a way, asking you to elevate your purpose into something that has more meaning for you. It's not just about the physical world, which is very much Saturn in the 10th house. It's more about the purpose behind that. And that's going to be the big story for you over the next few years. Now, each year, Saturn does go into a 5 month retrograde. But this year, it's not going to reverse into Pisces. And that retrograde begins on the 26th of July. It goes on for 5 months through to the 10th of December, and it's going to invert by 7 degrees. Now, if you do have any planets in the sign of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn between 0 and 17 degrees, you're going to feel that energy much more. But I also feel the opportunities for you come from the alliances that you can build up. And if you can work with people who are creators, who understand a degree of independence and freedom, but you can collaborate in some kind of way that helps one another and also helps you to earn money, that's going to be a great way of you working with the energy of Saturn. But what about Saturn's immediate influence this year? Well, of course, when the retrograde occurs, it can slow things down. If you did find last year that, particularly from the middle of July to the 1st of September, that some friendships got strained, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. And that could happen again this year from the 26th of July. But also, you can start rethinking some of those longer term ideas that you had. But more immediately before then, we do have Venus applying to Saturn on the 8th of March. If there is someone that you can collaborate with that you feel is very purposeful, very organized, and takes their responsibilities to heart, that could be a very good match. It's also the case that you could meet someone romantically and it could be a relationship that sticks around. Unfortunately, if there is a weak link in a relationship, it can show up then as well. On the 25th of March, it's the Sun's turn to apply to Saturn. And that can see some big questions come up for you if you are unsure about that future plan. But we do have on March the 28th the opportunity for you to use transformation, Pluto, and your association with others, your connections, the energy of Saturn and Neptune in the 11th house. That works very well for you. If there is something that's been bubbling away beneath the surface that has been perhaps making you feel a bit uncertain, on April the 19th, you might find that you could get more frustrated more easily as Saturn and Mars are in an exact conjunction. Don't persevere with a long term plan if it doesn't feel right. But we do have two squares on July the 6th and just before the end of the year when the Sun, first in Cancer and then in Capricorn, squares up with Saturn in your 11th house. And you may find across those two periods, you're having some challenges around finance if your values don't align with another person's. But I'm going to share with you shortly the ability to download that guide. But also, please do check out your monthly forecast for February because we've got the solar eclipse and we've also got a very powerful right angle between Mars and Uranus in the last week of February, which could be tricky. And I go into that in detail. You can see that video on the screen now. Now, one of the intriguing things about the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune on the 20th of February at 0 degrees is that 0 degrees is the vernal point, so the start of the zodiac. It's where on the spring equinox the whole journey begins again. So having the combination between Saturn and Neptune there is particularly intriguing to me because there's a form of astrology called Draconic astrology, where the North Node is moved from wherever it is in the natal chart to 0 degrees Aries. And that can change a chart quite a bit. But the person I want to give you a little bit of an insight to of how this works is Madonna. So on the screen is Madonna's nativity, and she was a Leo. So obviously, a person who's a performer has to have a degree of glow and radiance and magnetism, and having the sun, but also Uranus in the sign of Leo, along with Venus. Venus, I think, is the love of theatrics. Uranus is the confidence to be different. I think the Sun being in the third decan of the sign of Leo, sub-ruled by Mars, is the passion, but also a bit more edge. You can also see when it comes to the edge that Uranus and Mars are in a square. So that gives this person an appreciation of being provocative. Mars is the most prominent planet in the whole chart, so it is going to be very important. It's about pushing boundaries. However, if we dive a little deeper, that cluster of energy in her 12th house points towards someone who could think about things very deeply. Obviously, with the Virgo ascendant and the moon on it, someone who has a great appreciation of their immediate environment. But I feel that's the side of Madonna that has a real interest in psychology, healing, and anything to do with mythology and things like the Kabbalah. And in terms of her success, I feel that's driven a lot by the Sun and Jupiter being in a wonderful sextile, so potentially very fortunate. But if we look at that North Node, which I mentioned before, for her it's on a fixed star called Spica, Spica, and people with planets on Spica tend to be very prominent, can be hugely successful, and build up a big following. So the combination between the North Node and Jupiter suggests her life karma, her direction of travel, the North Node, has been about finding balance, interest in the arts, but definitely an ability to make money. So that's her natal chart. But let's look at Madonna's Draconic chart. So remember, the North Node is at 2402 in her natal. We go to a Draconic, and there is the North Node at 0 degrees Aries on the exact degree that this Saturn Neptune conjunction is happening. And that's why I wanted to tell you about it. Now, when I did share Madonna's chart a few years ago and said that she was a Leo, I had loads of people write to me and say, no, she's not, she's an Aquarius. But clearly, she is a Leo because she's born on the 16th of August. But in the Draconic version of the chart, her sun is on the anaretic degree of Capricorn. So this is a person with a real instinct for business, but also perhaps with the flavor of progressiveness that comes from Aquarius energy, which is the combination still of Pluto and Mercury, very analytical, but the combination of the ascendant and the moon in Aquarius is very much more to do with being groundbreaking than the Virgo in her natal chart, which can be someone who wants to provide services, is very detail orientated, very organized. She may be all of those things, but in this chart, the more radical part of her nature really is that much more visible. She still has the need to perhaps be more meditative, quiet, take time out of the limelight with the 12th house energy. And also, Saturn in the fourth house means that, you know, home and family is important to her. And I think it's right that she's adopted some children. So that shows a great responsibility and a great empathy to look after those who are less fortunate. But that combination of the planets stay in the same relationship. So we have the same aspect. We still have Uranus in a square with Mars, but Mars here is also very close to Spica in the natal chart. So as Mars, Draconic, conjunct the North Node and Jupiter in her natal. And, the ninth house is about expansion, it's about risk, independence. Uh, it is true that Mars is technically detrimented, but in this illustration, you can see that the Moon and Mars still very strong. So she's a great communicator. So, what the principles of Draconic astrology are is that they're the root of who we are. So, when we come into this world, Draconic's the root of our personality, and the natal is the fruit that comes from the tree of life that we go through. So, if we really work at it, we can see the outcome of our life physical journey much more like the natal chart. But some people find the Draconic chart represents their personalities much more. For example, my Draconic midpoint, sun and moon, is Cancer, and I am very much a home lover. And people who are close to me, been close to me for a very long time, I value those relationships very much. So, if you'd like to understand the difference between your natal chart and your Draconic chart, just like I've shared for Madonna, you can order your Draconic 12-month forecast and get your character analysis, your Draconic Life Roadmap report. And if you apply Draco 26 at the checkout, you'll get 50% off. But also, if you would like to order your natal 12-month forecast and natal life roadmap report, if you apply Astro 26 at the checkout, you can get 50% off for those too.